Mayor Sanders from Burlington. I am skipping around on the list. The reason I'm doing this is just to kind of give us a broad spectrum of different, there are lots of people from various different groups here, and that's why I'm doing it. Taking moderator's license.
The issue I think that we have to deal with tonight is not just the issue of budget cuts, which I expect that every person in this room is categorically opposed to. We're living in a time where working people and low-income people are experiencing the greatest suffering that they've ever had since the Great Depression. And it is absolutely inexcusable, and it's an insult to the people of one of the poorest states in America that the governor of this state and that the legislature of this state should talk about any more budget cuts. And I hope that we're all united on that. The gentleman who spoke before from the United Electrical Workers, I think, put his finger on what the real story is. And the real story is whether the government of the state of Vermont is going to represent all of the people, or it's going to represent a handful of people. That's what the story is. What's going on now is a total disgrace, and it's a total disgrace in this sense. If the legislature of the state of Vermont wants to vote tax cuts for the rich, let them have the guts to raise their hand and do it. But don't let them sneak it in the state of Vermont a la Ronald Reagan's cuts. That's a cowardly act to do. Clearly, what has got to happen, and what nobody up there is talking about except the few, and I congratulate those few members of the legislature who have the guts to begin to call a spade a spade. What is going on now in the state of Vermont, when they're talking about cuts for kids, cuts for the mentally ill, cuts for those people in the worst shape, are cuts for the rich in terms of their ability to pay taxes. That's what we're talking about. Budget cuts for the poor and tax cuts for the rich. And I think that that's a disgrace. The city of Burlington last year came to the legislature with what we thought was a modest proposal. The truth of the matter is, it was not a radical proposal. It was not calling for confiscation of wealth. It was not really asking... It was not asking, in fact, probably what we should be asking for. Basically, all that we asked for, the entire radical nature of this proposal was this: create a tax situation in the state of Vermont so that the wealthiest person in the state of Vermont would pay no more in taxes today than what they were paying in 1981. Not a terribly radical proposal. What we would do now is, under that proposal, is allow the 80%, the lowest 80% of wage earners in the state, the vast majority of the people, to take advantage of Reagan's tax cuts, meager though they may be for those people. But what we would ask is for the top 20% of the people, in a sliding scale, basically, to end up paying in total the same amount of taxes to the federal government and the state government that they paid in 1981. And our guess is right now that that reasonable proposal, that simple proposal, would bring in $50 million to the state of Vermont. Enough to eliminate the deficit completely, enough to pump money back into cities and towns so that we could lower or stabilize the property tax, a concern of the city of Burlington, and enough so that we would have more money to put money into the programs that are desperately needed rather than cut those programs. You know, something dawned on me. And it seemed to me that if we had a president of the United States who had the guts to take on the rich people and the corporations, and they made tax increases for the rich and tax cuts for the poor, the legislature would be screaming up and down, decouple the system. What they would be saying is it's unfair for the federal government to be imposing their tax ideas on us, an independent state. But strangely enough, when you have the most reactionary president, probably in the history of this country, who's giving tax breaks to the rich and oppressing the poor, scarcely a word can be heard. I think, as Jeannie Keller indicated when we began this meeting, it is of some historic nature. This meeting was not called for by the legislature. Representative Sadie White kindly got us this room, and I know that there are a number of people in the legislature here tonight. But basically, this is a people's meeting. We were not asked to come here. We came here on our own. And I think that the message that we have got to leave here in this State House is that enough is enough. This is one of the poorest states of America. Let justice be done. Tax those people and corporations who can afford to pay, and leave the rest of us alone. Thank you.